I woke up to the sound of scissors. Not the gentle snip of a mother trimming a child's bangs in the kitchen while humming along to the radio. Not the careful clip of a stylist working through split ends. This was industrial, mechanical, the kind of sound that doesn't belong in a bedroom at dawn. Sharp, rhythmic, relentless as a heartbeat that doesn't know when to stop. My eyes wouldn't open properly. They felt glued shut, weighted down by something heavier than sleep. My limbs were made of sandbags. When I tried to lift my hand to my face, my arm barely twitched against the mattress, like it belonged to someone else entirely. There was a thickness in my mouth, a cottony fog that tasted like rust, and something bitter I couldn't name. I tried to speak, to ask what was happening, but my tongue lay dead in my mouth. The scissors kept cutting. I could feel it then, the tug at my scalp, the cold metal brushing against my skin, the weight of something falling away. Hair. They were cutting my hair. No, not cutting, shaving. The electric buzz of clippers joined the scissors, and I felt the vibration against my skull, felt the cool air hitting parts of my head that had never known exposure. Through the haze, through the pharmaceutical fog that had turned my body into a prison, I heard my mother's voice, quiet, apologetic, broken. "I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry." And then another voice, sharper, colder, familiar in the way a scar is familiar. You know exactly where it came from, and you can never forget the moment it was made. My sister, Veronica. Cut her hair, or I cut you off. Your choice, Mom. You want to keep your house? Keep driving that car? Keep pretending you're not drowning in debt? Then finish it. The room spun, even though I was lying perfectly still. I tried to open my eyes again, tried to force my body to obey. But the drug, whatever they'd given me, had me pinned like a butterfly in a display case. All I could do was listen. All I could do was feel the pieces of myself falling away, strand by strand, onto the pillow beneath my head. "She'll understand eventually," Veronica said, and I could hear her pacing now, her designer heels clicking against my bedroom floor. This is my day tomorrow. Mine. I've worked my whole life for this partnership announcement. And I'm not going to let her upstage me by showing up looking like some Instagram model with her perfect hair and her perfect grades, and everyone fawning all over her like she's the second coming. My father's voice then, low and ashamed. "She's your sister. She's competition." Veronica snapped back. "She's always been competition. And tomorrow for once, I'm going to be the one people look at. I'm going to be the one they talk about, not her, me." The clippers moved over my skull again. I could feel my mother's hands shaking. "Ronnie, please," my mother whispered. "There has to be another way." "There isn't, I told you. The money I've been giving you. The payments on this house. The car note. Dad's medical bills. The credit cards you thought I didn't know about. All of it stops the second you decide she's more important than I am. So you tell me, Mom. Who's more important? The daughter who's kept this family afloat for the past 3 years? Or the daughter who's too busy being perfect to notice you're drowning?" The silence that followed was longer than the space between heartbeats. It was the kind of silence where decisions get made, where loyalty gets measured in dollars and fear. where a mother chooses which daughter to sacrifice. The clippers started again. I tried to scream, but only a small moan escaped my lips. A sound so pathetic, so helpless, that it barely qualified as human. My mother heard it. I know she did, because the clippers stopped for just a moment, and I felt her hand on my face, stroking my cheek the way she used to when I was small and had nightmares. "Shh, baby," she whispered. "It's just hair. It'll grow back. Just go back to sleep." But I couldn't sleep. I couldn't do anything but lie there as they took the one thing I'd always been vain about, the one physical feature that had made me feel beautiful. My hair had been down to my waist, thick, dark, glossy, the kind of hair that made strangers stop me on the street to ask what products I used. My hair that I'd been growing out for 4 years, that I'd planned to wear in an elegant updo for graduation, that I'd already picked out the silver pins for, the delicate pearl clips that would catch the light when I walked across the stage to accept my diploma. Tomorrow was supposed to be my day, the culmination of 4 years of relentless work, perfect grades, student body president, 3 varsity sports, volunteer work that had taken me to 4 different countries. Tomorrow I was supposed to give the valedictorian speech I'd been writing and rewriting for weeks. The speech that had made my English teacher cry when I practiced it for her. Tomorrow I was supposed to walk across that stage and prove to everyone, to myself, that all the sacrifice had been worth it. Tomorrow I was supposed to be visible. Instead, my sister had decided I needed to disappear. The clippers finished their work. I felt my mother's hands brushing away the last bits of hair from my neck, from my shoulders. Felt her place a soft kiss on my bare scalp. An apology that meant nothing, that changed nothing, that was somehow worse than if she'd said nothing at all. "It's done," my father said quietly. His voice sounded like it was coming from very far away, or maybe like he was the one who'd been drugged. "Can we go now? Please?" "Clean up the hair," Veronica said. "All of it. I don't want her finding it when she wakes up. I don't want evidence. Evidence. As if what they'd done was a crime. As if they already knew even then that this was unforgivable." I heard them leave, the door closing softly. Footsteps retreating down the hallway. My sister's voice giving more instructions I couldn't quite make out. And then I was alone in my room, in my bed, with my bare scalp against the pillow, and the drug pulling me back down into unconsciousness. The last thought I had before the darkness took me completely was this: they chose her. When it mattered, when it counted, they chose her over me. And that realization hurt more than anything they could have done to my body. I woke up to sunlight streaming through my window, and a headache that felt like my skull was splitting open from the inside. For a brief, merciful moment, I didn't remember. I just knew I felt wrong, heavy and slow and disconnected from my body, in a way that made me wonder if I was getting sick, if I should stay home from school today of all days. And then I lifted my hand to push my hair out of my face, and my hand met skin. Just skin, smooth, bare, vulnerable. I sat up so fast, the room tilted sideways, staggered to my bathroom mirror. Looked at my reflection. The face looking back at me was mine, and also wasn't. Same dark eyes, same full lips, same olive skin that tanned easily, same small scar on my chin from when I fell off my bike in 3rd grade. But above all that familiarity was the stranger's scalp, completely bald, slightly red, with a few tiny nicks where the clippers had been handled without care. I looked like a patient. I looked like someone going through chemotherapy. I looked like every ounce of femininity had been stripped away along with my hair. I looked invisible. My hands started shaking. I touched my head tentatively, hoping somehow this was a dream, a nightmare I could wake up from. But the skin under my fingers was real, warm, tender, undeniably, horrifically real. And then I remembered the scissors, the clippers, my mother's shaking hands, my sister's cold voice. Cut her hair, or I cut you off. They had drugged me. They had shaved my head while I was unconscious. They had done this to me on purpose, and on graduation day, because Veronica couldn't stand the thought of anyone looking at me instead of her. I sank down onto the bathroom floor, my back against the cabinet, and I tried to breathe through the panic rising in my chest. Today was graduation. In 3 hours, I was supposed to be at school. In 4 hours, I was supposed to give my valedictorian speech in front of 500 people. My extended family was coming. My teachers would be there. The local news was covering it because our school had won some award for academic excellence, and they wanted to interview the student body president. I couldn't do it. I couldn't walk out there looking like this. I couldn't stand in front of everyone I knew, everyone who'd ever had an opinion about me, everyone who'd ever called me pretty or perfect or put together, and let them see me like this, raw, exposed, vulnerable as an open wound. I could hear them now. Not the kind things people say when someone is sick. The other things. The whispered speculations. The assumptions. The pity that's really just cruelty wearing a nicer mask. What happened to her hair? Oh my God, she's bald. Did she have a breakdown? Maybe she's sick. Cancer, probably. I heard she shaved it for attention. You know how she is. Always has to be the center of everything. The nausea hit me hard. I barely made it to the toilet before I was throwing up, retching until there was nothing left but bile and the metallic taste of the drug still in my system. When I was finished, I stayed there on the cold tile floor, my forehead pressed against the porcelain, and I let myself cry. Not pretty crying. Not the kind of crying you do in movies where your face stays perfect and one artistic tear rolls down your cheek. This was ugly crying, gulping sobs that hurt my ribs, snot running down my face. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep and primal. The place where we keep the pain we don't have words for. They had taken something from me. Not just my hair, though that was bad enough. They had taken my agency, my consent, my right to decide what happened to my own body. They had invaded my space, violated my trust, and done something irreversible because it was convenient for them, because it made Veronica's life easier, because I was in her way. And this was how you moved obstacles. You removed them, reshaped them, made them smaller so they couldn't block your light. A knock on my bedroom door made me freeze. "Sweetie?" My mother's voice, tentative and scared. "Are you up? We need to leave for school in an hour." I didn't answer. I couldn't. If I opened my mouth, I was afraid of what would come out. Screaming, probably. Or accusations. Or questions that would force her to look at what she'd done and admit she'd chosen wrong. "Sweetie, I know you're upset," she continued, her voice cracking, "But it's just hair, it'll grow back, and we got you this." The door opened. My mother stood there holding a shopping bag, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy like she'd been crying all night. Behind her, I could see my father lurking in the hallway, looking anywhere but at me. "We got you some scarves," my mother said, pulling out squares of fabric in various colors: burgundy, navy, sage green. "Pretty ones, and there's a wig in here too, just in case you get out." My voice came out hoarse and flat. Dead. The voice of someone who'd already checked out of this relationship, this family, this life. "Honey, please, get out." She set the bag down, just inside the door, and backed away. Her hands raised like I was a wild animal she was trying not to spook. "We'll be downstairs. We're leaving at 9:30, okay? Don't be late. You can't miss your own graduation." The door closed. I stared at the bag of scarves and wigs, their pathetic attempt at a solution, as if covering up what they'd done would somehow make it less real, less violating, less unforgivable. I thought about not going. I thought about staying in bed, in this room, in this house where I'd apparently been nothing more than an inconvenience to be managed. I thought about letting Veronica win, letting her have her perfect day where she was the center of attention and I was nowhere to be seen. But then I thought about my speech. The one I'd worked on for weeks. The one about perseverance and dignity and not letting other people's opinion define you. The one I'd meant to apply to academic pressure and social media expectations and teenage insecurity. The one that suddenly meant something completely different. I pulled myself up off the bathroom floor, splashed cold water on my face, looked at myself in the mirror again, really looked, until the stranger's face started to feel like mine. I didn't touch the scarves. I didn't touch the wig. Instead, I went to my closet and pulled out the dress I'd chosen for today. A simple, elegant navy sheath that hit just below the knee, with a high neckline and 3/4 sleeves. Professional, poised. The kind of dress that said I knew exactly who I was and didn't need adornment to prove it. I put it on. Applied minimal makeup, just enough to look intentional, polished, awake. Added the pearl earrings my grandmother had given me for my 18th birthday. Put on my heels, the ones that made me stand 3 inches taller than everyone expected. And then I looked at myself in the full-length mirror and made a decision. I was going to walk into that school with my head bare. I was going to give my speech exactly as planned. I was going to stand at that podium and look out at everyone who'd ever known me. Everyone who'd ever made assumptions about who I was based on how I looked. And I was going to show them that I was still here. Still standing. Still unbreakable. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because being hurt and being broken are 2 different things. And I'd be damned if I let Veronica turn me into the latter. My parents were waiting by the front door when I came downstairs. They both did a double take when they saw me. Saw that I wasn't wearing any of their guilt offerings, that I was walking out with my bare head held high. "Sweetheart," my mother started, reaching for me. "Are you sure you don't want—" I walked past her without a word, past both of them. Out the door and to the car and into the back seat, where I stared out the window and refused to acknowledge their existence. The drive to school was silent, except for my mother's occasional sniffles and my father's white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel. I felt nothing toward them, nothing at all. That was the worst part. Not the anger, which I'd expected, but the complete absence of feeling. They'd become strangers overnight. People I used to live with. People who'd once mattered. People who'd chosen someone else when it counted. When we pulled into the school parking lot, I could see my classmates milling around in their graduation robes, taking pictures with their families, laughing and hugging and crying happy tears. I watched a girl I barely knew leap into her father's arms. Watched another get kissed on both cheeks by a mother who looked at her like she'd hung the moon. Watched all these normal family moments happening around me and felt the absence of what I should have had like a physical ache. "We'll be in our seats," my father said quietly as I got out of the car. "We're so proud of you, kiddo. You know that, right?" I closed the car door without responding and walked toward the building where I was supposed to pick up my gown and cap. Except I wouldn't need the cap now, would I? Caps were for people with hair. People who hadn't been assaulted the night before their big day by the three people who were supposed to love them most in the world. I made it about 10 feet before the stairs started. At first, just a few people glancing my way, then doing a double take. Then whispers. Not even subtle, just open, gaping and pointing, and the kind of shocked murmuring that follows tragedy or scandal. I kept walking, kept my spine straight, kept my eyes forward, like I was on a runway. And this was intentional, like I'd chosen this, like this was a statement and not a violation. "Oh my God, is that Natalie? What happened to her hair? Holy shit, she's bald. Maybe she's sick. Did she do that on purpose?" I pushed through the crowd and into the building, where I was supposed to check in with Mrs. Henderson, the senior class advisor. She was standing by the table where the gowns were laid out, checking names off a list, and when she looked up and saw me, her clipboard clattered to the floor. "Natalie?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Sweetheart, what happened?" This was the moment where I could have lied. Could have said I shaved it myself. A bold statement. An artistic choice. Could have said I was sick. Garnered sympathy. Let people think tragedy instead of treachery. Could have said anything that would have been easier than the truth. But I was so tired of easier. Easier had gotten me drugged. Easier had gotten me shaved. Easier had gotten me parents who chose my sister's money over my bodily autonomy. "Family matter," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I'd rather not discuss it." Mrs. Henderson bent down to pick up her clipboard, her hands shaking slightly. Of course. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry. Here." She handed me my gown, navy blue, like all the others. "The ceremony starts in 30 minutes. You're giving your speech right after Principal Morrison's welcome address. Do you need—" "I'm fine," I said, even though I wasn't. "Is there somewhere private I can wait until it starts?" She directed me to a small classroom off the main hallway, away from the chaos of my classmates getting ready. I went there and sat in the silence, pulling on my graduation gown and staring at the empty cap that lay on the desk beside me. A knock on the door made me look up. Jasmine stood there, my best friend since freshman year, her eyes wide and already filling with tears. She didn't say anything, just rushed over and wrapped her arms around me. Careful and gentle, like I might break. "Nat," she whispered, "what the hell happened?" And for the first time all morning, I let myself feel it. Let the enormity of what had been done to me crash over me in waves. I told her everything. The drug in my water, the sound of scissors, Veronica's ultimatum, my parents' choice. I told her how I woke up and didn't recognize myself. How I'd thrown up and cried on the bathroom floor. How I'd decided to come here anyway, because the alternative was letting them erase me completely. Jasmine listened to all of it. And when I was done, she pulled back and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. It was rage. Pure, crystalline, protective rage. She did this to you. Your sister did this. She paid them to do it. Threatened to stop helping with their bills if they didn't. Nat, that's... She struggled for words. That's assault. That's actual, literal assault. You were unconscious. You couldn't consent. I know what it is, I said quietly. Believe me, I know. You have to report them. I have to give a speech in 20 minutes. I have to walk across that stage and get my diploma and pretend like I'm not falling apart. After that, we can talk about what comes next. Jasmine looked like she wanted to argue, but something in my face must have stopped her. Instead, she pulled out her phone and started typing furiously. What are you doing? I asked. Group text. To everyone who matters. I'm telling them what happened. Not details. Just that your family did something unforgivable, and you need support. By the time you walk out there, the whole senior class is going to know you're not sick. You didn't do this to yourself, and anyone who has a problem with how you look can deal with me. Jazz, no, you don't get to be alone in this. You don't get to walk out there and face those vultures by yourself. We've got you, I've got you. And if your family thinks they can hurt you without consequences, they're about to learn differently. She hit send. Within seconds, her phone started buzzing with responses. Shock, zhzhg, outrage, promises of support. She showed me some of them, messages from people I'd gone to school with for years, people I'd worked on projects with, competed against, laughed with, grown up alongside. That's fucked up. Tell her we've got her back. Her family did what? Oh hell no, Nat is stronger than all of us combined. She's got this. I will literally fight her sister. Something loosened in my chest. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't alone. I had people who saw what had been done to me and called it what it was. Wrong. Unforgivable. Not my fault. Thank you, I whispered to Jasmine. And she squeezed my hand. Always. Now, come on. Let's go make sure everyone remembers this graduation. Just not for the reason your sister wanted. The auditorium was packed. 500 graduating seniors, their families, teachers, administrators, local reporters with cameras, all of them waiting for the ceremony to start, waiting to celebrate our accomplishments and our bright futures and all the potential we supposedly had. I stood in the wings with the other students scheduled to speak, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Ahead of me in line, I could see Marcus Chen, our student council vice president, who was giving the welcome address. Behind me was Sophie Rodriguez, who'd won the art scholarship and would be introducing the scholarship recipients. And after me would come the diploma distribution, the turning of tassels, the throwing of caps into the air. All the traditional moments that were supposed to mark our transition from children to adults. I could see my parents in the audience, third row from the front. My mother looked like she'd aged 10 years overnight. My father had his arm around her shoulders, holding her together. And next to them, in a designer suit that probably cost more than my car, was Veronica. She looked perfect, of course. Hair professionally styled, makeup flawless, posture radiating confidence and success. She was scanning the crowd, smiling at people she recognized, probably preparing for the moment after the ceremony when she'd network and schmooze and make sure everyone knew about her big promotion at the law firm. She hadn't seen me yet. She didn't know I'd come without the wig, without the scarves, without any attempt to hide what she'd done to me. Principal Morrison took the podium, and the crowd settled into silence. He gave the standard welcome speech, thanking parents, praising teachers, congratulating students. Marcus followed with his address, earnest and funny and full of inside jokes that made everyone laugh. The ceremony proceeded exactly as planned, and with each passing moment, the knot in my stomach pulled tighter. And then I heard my name. "It is my great honor," Principal Morrison said, his voice carrying across the packed auditorium, "to introduce our class valedictorian, student body president, and one of the finest young people I've had the privilege of teaching in my 30 years in education. Please, welcome Natalie Chen." The applause started before I'd even taken my first step. I walked out from the wings, my graduation gown swishing around my legs, my bare head catching the stage lights, and the applause faltered. Not stopped exactly, but there was a visible ripple of shock moving through the crowd as people registered what they were seeing. I could hear the whispers starting already. Could see heads turning, people leaning toward each other to ask what had happened, parents pointing me out to confused relatives who'd expected someone with hair. I walked to the podium, adjusted the microphone, looked out at 500 faces, all staring at me with varying degrees of surprise, pity, curiosity, and concern. And then I found Veronica in the third row. Found her eyes. Watched the color drain from her face as she realized I'd come. Realized I hadn't hidden. Realized her plan to make me invisible had backfired in the most spectacular way possible. I smiled at her. Not a friendly smile. A knowing smile. A smile that said, "You tried to erase me, but I'm still here." Then I opened my mouth and began to speak. "Good morning, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Natalie Chen, and I'm honored to be your valedictorian today. I have to be honest with you. The speech I prepared for this moment is not the speech I'm going to give. Something happened last night that changed everything. Something that made me realize the speech I'd written, while good, wasn't true, wasn't honest, wasn't real. So instead, I'm going to tell you a story, and I'm going to speak some truths that are uncomfortable, painful, and probably not what anyone expected to hear at a high school graduation. But I hope, they're truths worth sharing. Last night, I was drugged by my parents and had my head shaved while I was unconscious. This wasn't a medical procedure. I'm not sick. I didn't consent to this. It was done to me as a favor to my older sister, who was worried that my presence at this graduation, my hair, my appearance, my moment, would somehow take attention away from a professional milestone she's celebrating today. She gave my parents an ultimatum: shave my head, or she'd stop helping them financially. And they chose her. They chose her money, her approval, her comfort over my bodily autonomy, over my consent, over me. The auditorium was so silent, I could hear my own breathing. People weren't even whispering anymore. They were frozen, shocked into complete stillness by what I was saying. I could see my mother's hand over her mouth, could see my father staring at the floor, could see Veronica looking around frantically, probably calculating how bad this was for her professional reputation. How many people here knew people at her firm? How much damage I was doing to her carefully curated image. Good. I tell you this not to gain sympathy, though I won't pretend I don't need support right now. I tell you this because I want to talk about what it means to be valued, about the difference between being loved and being convenient, about what happens when the people who are supposed to protect you decide you're worth less than money, or comfort, or someone else's insecurity. We spend our whole lives being taught that family is everything, that blood is thicker than water, that your family will always have your back, always choose you, always love you unconditionally. And for a lot of you, that's true. I see you in this audience with your parents who drove hours to be here, who cried when you got your acceptance letters, who will frame your diploma and tell everyone they meet about your accomplishments. But for some of us, family isn't a safe place. Family is conditional. Family is something you earn by being convenient, by not asking for too much, by making yourself smaller so other people can be bigger. Family is something that can be taken away the moment you inconvenience the wrong person. I spent my entire high school career being perfect. Perfect grades, perfect attendance, perfect involvement in extracurriculars. I was student body president, captain of 3 sports teams, volunteer coordinator for our community service programs. I did everything right. Everything they asked. Everything that was supposed to make them proud. And it still wasn't enough. Because at the end of the day, I wasn't the child they valued most. I was just the one who was easier to hurt. So here's what I want to say to anyone out there who's ever felt less than, who's ever been chosen second, who's ever been sacrificed for someone else's comfort. You are not the problem. You are not too much. You are not too sensitive. You are not asking for too much when you ask to be treated with basic human dignity and respect. The problem is the people who taught you that love is conditional, that safety is contingent on your compliance, that being hurt by family is just something you should accept because that's just how they are, or they're doing their best, or family is complicated. No, family is not complicated. Love is not complicated. Respect is not complicated. These are simple things that require only one quality: deciding that another person's well-being matters as much as your own. And when someone, even family, especially family, shows you that they can't or won't do that, you are allowed to call it what it is. You are allowed to protect yourself. You are allowed to walk away. I'm standing here today without my hair, without something I valued, something I'd grown for years, something that made me feel beautiful and confident and like myself. It was taken from me without my permission by people who should have protected me. And I'm not going to lie to you. It hurts. It hurts more than anything I've experienced in my 18 years of life. But here's what they didn't take: my voice, my strength, my dignity, my knowledge of my own worth, my ability to stand in front of all of you and say, this happened to me, and it was wrong, and I'm not going to pretend it wasn't. They tried to make me invisible. They tried to reduce me to something embarrassing, something that needed to be hidden. And I'm here to tell you, I refuse. I refuse to be invisible. I refuse to be ashamed of what was done to me. I refuse to carry their guilt as my own. And I want you to refuse too. If someone in your life, family, friends, partners, anyone, makes you feel like you need to earn basic respect, refuse. If someone tells you that love means accepting mistreatment, refuse. If someone says your pain isn't valid because other people have it worse, refuse. If someone tries to make you smaller so they can feel bigger, refuse. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to shine. You are allowed to be visible and valued and chosen first. And if the people around you can't handle that, that's their limitation, not yours, sir. I don't know what comes next for me. I don't know how I rebuild trust with my family, or if I even should. I don't know how long it'll take before I can look in the mirror and recognize myself again. I don't know a lot of things, but here's what I do know. I'm still here. I'm still standing. I'm still speaking. And no one, not my parents, not my sister, not anyone, can take that away from me unless I let them. And I'm not going to let them. So, to my fellow graduates, congratulations. We made it. We survived high school. We earned our diplomas. And we're about to walk out of here into a world that will test us in ways we can't even imagine yet. Some of those tests will come from strangers. Some will come from circumstances beyond our control. And some will come from the people we love most. When that happens, I hope you remember this moment. I hope you remember that surviving isn't the same as thriving. That you don't owe anyone your silence about your own pain. That you are allowed to choose yourself, even when, especially when, no one else will. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And thank you for seeing me, really seeing me, even when I looked nothing like I did yesterday. I stepped back from the podium. For a moment, there was nothing. Just silence, just 500 people processing what I'd said. Just my parents and my sister frozen in their seats, like they'd been turned to stone. And then Jasmine stood up in the student section. Just stood up, started clapping, slow, deliberate, loud enough to break the spell. Then Marcus joined her. Then Sophie, then more people and more until the entire senior class was on their feet, applauding so hard the sound filled the auditorium like thunder. The parents joined in. The teachers, the administrators, even the reporters at the back were clapping. Though I noticed a few of them had their phones out, probably already drafting headlines. Only 3 people in the entire auditorium stayed seated. My mother, my father, and Veronica. I looked at them one more time. My mother was crying openly now, her mascara running down her cheeks. My father had his head in his hands. And Veronica was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, not smugness, not calculation, fear. She was afraid of what I'd just done, afraid of who might have heard me, afraid that her perfect reputation, her carefully constructed image, her golden child status might have just been shattered by her little sister telling the truth in front of hundreds of witnesses and multiple cameras. Good. I walked off the stage to standing ovation that didn't stop until Principal Morrison had to ask everyone to please take their seats so we could continue the ceremony. And as I went back to my place in the wings, as I waited for my turn to receive my diploma and walk across that stage one more time, I realized something. I was free. Not because my hair was gone, not because I'd exposed my family's dysfunction to half the town, but because I'd finally given myself permission to be angry, to be hurt, to call wrong things wrong and refuse to minimize my own pain for someone else's comfort. They'd tried to make me invisible. Instead, they'd made me unforgettable. The ceremony ended 3 hours later. Diplomas distributed, tassels turned, caps thrown into the air with all the requisite joy and relief. My classmates swarmed me afterwards. Hugs, tears, promises to stay in touch. Expressions of support that felt genuine and overwhelming and like exactly what I needed. My family didn't approach me. They stood off to the side, watching, waiting. Veronica left first, probably to salvage whatever she could of her big day. My parents lingered longer, but when it became clear I wasn't going to come to them, they left, too. No goodbye. No attempt at explanation. Just gone. Jasmine drove me home. To her home, not mine. Her parents had already made up the guest room for me. Already told me I could stay as long as I needed. They hugged me when I arrived. Careful and kind, the way you hold something precious that's been broken and might break further if you're not gentle. "We're so proud of you," Jasmine's mother said, smoothing her hand over my bare head like it was the most natural thing in the world. That took incredible courage. I nodded, too exhausted for words. That night, I slept in Jasmine's guest room with my phone turned off and my door locked. I slept 14 hours straight, my body finally releasing the tension it had been holding since the moment I'd heard those scissors. And when I woke up the next morning, the first thing I saw was a text from an unknown number. "This is Sarah Chen, partner at Chen & Associates law firm. I was at your graduation yesterday. I'm also your sister's boss. We need to talk. When you're ready, call me at this number." I stared at the text for a long time. Then I saved the number, got out of bed, and started planning what came next. Because Veronica had made a mistake. She'd thought taking my hair would take my power. She'd thought humiliation would make me smaller. She'd been wrong on both counts. I didn't call Sarah Chen right away. For 3 days, I stayed at Jasmine's house, sleeping and eating and trying to remember what it felt like to be safe. Jasmine's parents didn't push me to talk or make plans or do anything except heal. They just made sure I was fed, that I knew I was welcome, that I had space to fall apart if I needed to. On day 4, my phone started ringing. My mother, mostly, but also my father, and even a few calls from numbers I didn't recognize. I didn't answer any of them. I wasn't ready. I wasn't sure I'd ever be ready. But on day 5, I listened to the voicemails. My mother's voice. "Sweetie, please. We need to talk. We need to explain. It wasn't supposed to go like that. Please call us back." My father's voice. "Kiddo, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But we're still your parents. We love you. Please don't shut us out." And then, surprisingly, Veronica's voice. "Nat, it's me. Look, I think we should talk. What happened? What I asked them to do. I didn't think you'd react like this. Can we please just talk? You're making this so much worse than it needs to be." I listened to that last one 3 times, trying to parse what she was actually saying. She was sorry I'd reacted badly. She hadn't expected me to tell people what she'd done. She thought I was the one making things worse. That was when I called Sarah Chen. We met at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory. She was in her late 40s, with steel grey hair pulled into a neat bun, and the kind of sharp, intelligent eyes that probably didn't miss anything. She'd ordered me a coffee before I arrived, just appeared at the table with 2 cups, handing me one without preamble. "Cream, no sugar," she said. "Jasmine told me. Hope that's okay." "You talked to Jasmine? I wanted to make sure you were being taken care of." She assured me you were. Sarah sat down, folded her hands on the table and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "How are you doing, Natalie?" "I've been better." "I imagine you have." She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "I'm going to be direct with you, because I think that's what you need right now. What your sister did to you, or rather, what she paid your parents to do to you, is not just morally reprehensible. It's legally actionable. Battery, at minimum, potentially assault, possibly extortion, depending on the exact nature of the financial pressure she applied." I felt my throat tighten. "I didn't come here to sue my family." "I'm not suggesting you should. I'm telling you what your options are." She took a sip of her coffee. "But that's not actually why I wanted to talk to you. I wanted to talk about your sister. About what kind of person she is, what kind of lawyer she is, and what kind of partner she was about to become at my firm." Was, past tense. I looked up sharply. "What do you mean, was about to become?" "Your graduation was Saturday. We were planning to announce Veronica's promotion to partner on Monday morning. Big celebration, press release, the works. She'd been working toward this for years, and by all accounts, she'd earned it. Excellent legal mind, good with clients, brought in significant revenue. On paper, she was perfect." "On paper?" I repeated. "On paper," Sarah confirmed. "But here's the thing about law, Natalie. It's not just about being smart or skilled or profitable. It's about judgment, character, the ability to make ethical decisions under pressure. And when I watched your speech on Saturday, when I heard what your sister had done to you, I realized we had a serious problem." She pulled out her phone, tapped a few times, and slid it across the table to me. On the screen was an email chain, dozens of messages, all sent in the past 3 days, all about Veronica. "This," Sarah said, "is what happened after your speech went viral. Because it did go viral, by the way. 6 million views and counting. Local news picked it up, then regional, then national. There are think pieces being written about family dynamics and bodily autonomy. There are social media threads dissecting every word you said, and there are a lot of people asking whether Chen and Associates really wants to promote someone who would do what your sister did." I scrolled through the emails, my hands shaking slightly. Client concerns, partner meetings, discussion of reputational risk and firm values, and whether this reflects the kind of leadership we want to cultivate. "We postponed the announcement," Sarah said quietly. "And yesterday, we asked Veronica to take a leave of absence while we conduct a formal review of the incident." "You're going to fire her?" "It wasn't a question. We're going to determine whether she's the right fit for partnership. Which between you and me means yes." "Probably. Because here's what I've learned in 30 years of practicing law. People who think it's acceptable to violate someone's bodily autonomy to serve their own interests don't suddenly develop ethics when they make partner. They just have more power to abuse." I slid the phone back across the table. "She's going to blame me for this. Let her." She should blame herself. Sarah leaned forward, her expression intense. Natalie, I want you to understand something. You didn't do this to her. She did this to herself. She made a choice, a terrible, illegal, deeply unethical choice, and she's facing consequences. That's not your fault. That's justice. Justice. It was supposed to feel good, wasn't it? Vindicating. But all I felt was tired. What do you want from me? I asked. Nothing. I wanted you to know what's happening. I wanted you to know that your story mattered, that people heard you, that there are consequences for what was done to you. And she hesitated, then pulled a business card from her purse and slid it across the table. I wanted to give you this, my personal number. If you decide you want to pursue legal action, if you need references for college applications, if you just need someone to talk to who's not emotionally involved in this mess, call me. I took the card, turned it over in my hands. Why are you doing this? Because 25 years ago, I was you. Different circumstances, same pattern. Family member who saw me as competition rather than kin. Person who should have protected me who chose not to. And no one stood up for me. No one told me it wasn't my fault. No one gave me permission to be angry or resources to fight back. So I'm standing up for you. Consider it paying forward what I wish someone had done for me. We talked for another hour. She told me about her sister, who'd sabotaged her college applications because she was threatened by Sarah's academic success. About her parents, who told her to just let it go, to keep the peace, to stop being so sensitive. About how it had taken her years to understand that family loyalty doesn't mean accepting abuse. The hardest thing, she said as we were leaving, is going to be accepting that some people will never apologize, never acknowledge what they did wrong, never change. And you'll have to decide if you can live with that or if you need distance to survive. I thought about that as I drove back to Jasmine's house. Thought about my parents' voicemails, the apologies that weren't really apologies. Thought about Veronica's message, the complete absence of accountability or remorse. Thought about the fact that none of them had asked how I was doing, only how they could manage the fallout. That night, I finally called my mother. She answered on the first ring. Natalie, oh honey, thank God. I'm not coming home, I said, cutting her off. I'm not coming back to that house. And I'm not pretending this didn't happen just so everyone can feel comfortable again. Sweetheart, please. I'm not finished. I want you to listen, and I want you to really hear what I'm saying, because I'm only going to say this once. I heard her breathing on the other end, ragged and scared. What you did to me was assault. Legally, morally, ethically. It was assault. You drugged me, you violated my body, you stole something from me that I can't get back. And you did it because Veronica threatened you with money, because you were more afraid of losing your house and your car and your comfortable life than you were of losing me. That's not fair. It's completely fair. It's the truth. You made a choice. You chose her. You chose her money over my safety, her comfort over my consent, her feelings over mine. And I need you to stop pretending that's complicated or difficult to understand, because it's not. It's simple. You picked her. You always pick her. We love you. I don't care. And the terrifying thing was, I meant it. I genuinely didn't care if they loved me, because their love had proven to be worthless. Love without respect is just manipulation with better PR. You love me? Great. You also drugged me and shaved my head while I was unconscious. Both things can be true, but only one of them matters to me right now. What do you want from us? My mother's voice broke. What can we do to fix this? I don't think you can fix this. I don't think you understand what you took from me. And I don't think you're capable of understanding. But if you want to try, if you actually want to try, here's what I need. I took a deep breath. This was the part I'd been rehearsing for days. The script I'd written and rewritten until the words were exactly right. 1. I need you to admit out loud that what you did was assault, not a mistake, not something we regret. Assault. I need you to say the word and own what it means. 2. I need you to cut off financial support from Veronica completely. Every penny she's been giving you, every payment she's been making, every bit of leverage she's had over you. It ends. If that means you lose the house, you lose the house. If that means you have to make different choices, make them. But you don't get to take her money and then act like you're victims in this situation. 3. I need space. I don't know how long. Maybe months. Maybe years. Maybe forever. But I need you to respect that I'm not ready to have a relationship with you right now. And I might never be ready again. 4. I need you to stop calling me. Stop texting. Stop trying to explain or justify or minimize what happened. When I'm ready to talk, if I'm ever ready, I'll contact you. Until then, you leave me alone. The silence on the other end was so long, I thought she might have hung up. Then, and if we can't do those things? Then you've answered my question about whether you're capable of change, and I'll know exactly where I stand. Natalie, please. Those are my terms, Mum. Take them or leave them. But I'm done negotiating my own worth. I hung up before she could respond. Sat there on Jasmine's guest bed, phone in hand, and waited for the guilt to hit. The fear that I'd been too harsh, too unforgiving, too demanding. It didn't come. All I felt was relief. 2 weeks after graduation, I got an email from the financial aid office at Columbia University, where I'd been accepted for the fall. There was a problem with my parents' financial information, the email said. They'd been listed as my primary support on the FAFSA, but the bank statements they'd submitted didn't match the income they'd reported. Could I please have them submit corrected documents? I called the financial aid office and explained that I was no longer in contact with my parents, that I'd be financially independent moving forward, that I needed to know what my options were. The counselor was sympathetic but firm. Without parental financial information, I wouldn't qualify for most need-based aid. I could appeal for independent status, but that process took time, and the deadline for fall enrollment was rapidly approaching. I hung up and stared at my acceptance letter, the one I'd been so proud of when it arrived 4 months ago. Columbia had been my dream school, the place I'd worked toward for 4 years, the prize at the end of all my suffering. And now I couldn't afford it. I thought about calling my parents, asking them to submit the documents. But I knew what that would mean. Crawling back, admitting I needed them, giving them leverage over me again. And I'd rather flip burgers and go to community college than give them that power. So I started looking at alternatives. State schools with good financial aid, gap year programs, work-study options. I made spreadsheets, calculated budgets, tried to figure out how to pay for an education without family support. And then, 3 days later, I got another email. This one from an address I didn't recognize. Columbia Alumni Scholar, gmail.com. Dear Natalie, my name is Margaret Whitmore. I graduated from Columbia in 1987, and I've been funding a small scholarship for exceptional students facing financial hardship ever since. Your name was brought to my attention by someone who thought you might be a good candidate. I've watched your graduation speech. I've read your transcripts and your admissions essays. And I've spoken to several of your teachers, all of whom had glowing things to say about your character and resilience. I would like to offer you a full scholarship to Columbia, tuition, room, board, and a stipend for expenses. The only conditions are that you maintain a 3.5 GPA and that you agree to meet with me once a semester to discuss your progress. This is not charity. This is an investment in someone I believe will do extraordinary things. Please let me know if you're interested. Sincerely, Margaret Whitmore. I read the email 3 times before I let myself believe it was real. Then I called the number at the bottom and listened to it ring, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break out of my chest. A woman answered, older, with a warm voice and the kind of confidence that comes from decades of success. Natalie, she said, like we were old friends. I was hoping you'd call. Is this real? I asked. The scholarship, is it actually real? Completely real. I've already spoken to the financial aid office. If you accept, everything will be processed within a week. Who told you about me? I had to know, had to understand how this miracle had happened. Sarah Chen. She's a friend from law school. She called me last week and told me your story. Not the public version, the real one. She thought I might be able to help. Sarah Chen, who'd bought me coffee and shown me Veronica's downfall and given me her card, had done this. Had saved my future while I was too busy surviving to save it myself. I don't know what to say, I whispered. Say yes. Say you'll take the scholarship and go to New York and build a life that has nothing to do with the people who hurt you. Say you'll prove to yourself that you don't need their support to succeed. Yes, God, yes, thank you. Don't thank me. Just promise me something. Anything. Promise me that when you're successful, and you will be successful, Natalie, I can already tell. Promise me you'll do this for someone else. Find a young woman who's been hurt by her family, who's struggling to survive, who needs someone to believe in her, and give her the same gift I'm giving you. I promise, I said, and I meant it with every part of my being. We talked for another 30 minutes about logistics, about move-in dates, about what I'd need to bring. And when I hung up, I sat there in stunned silence, trying to process the fact that my life had just completely changed. I didn't need my parents. I didn't need Veronica's money or my family's support, or anything from the people who'd betrayed me. I had strangers who'd shown me more kindness than my family ever had. I had opportunities they couldn't take away. I had a future. The calls from my mother stopped after about 3 weeks. The last voicemail she left was short. I need you to know we tried, honey. We tried to do what you asked. But Ronnie said... She said if we cut her off, she'd go public with things about our finances, about choices we made. And we can't. We just can't risk that right now. I hope you'll understand someday. I hope you'll forgive us. I deleted it without responding. My father never called at all. Veronica sent me exactly one message, via Instagram DM, since I'd blocked her number. You ruined my life. I hope you're happy. Everything I worked for is gone because you couldn't handle a haircut. Grow up. I screenshot it, saved it to a folder I titled Evidence, and blocked her there too. Because that's what I was doing now. Collecting evidence. Not for a lawsuit. I still wasn't sure I wanted to put myself through that. But for myself. For the day when I doubted whether I'd done the right thing. Whether I'd overreacted. Whether I should have tried harder to forgive and forget and keep the peace. I had my graduation speech, which had been filmed from multiple angles by parents and reporters and now lived permanently on the internet. I had Veronica's DM, casual and cruel and completely devoid of remorse. I had my mother's voicemail admitting they'd chosen Veronica's demands over mine. I had Sarah Chen's email chain documenting how Veronica's actions had cost her the partnership she'd supposedly worked so hard for. I had evidence that what happened to me was real, was wrong, was worth protecting myself from. And I had plans. I left for Colombia in late August. Jasmine and her parents helped me pack, drove me to the airport, hugged me goodbye with tears and promises to visit. Sarah Chen sent me a care package that arrived my first week. Coffee, snacks, a weighted blanket, and a note that said, "Homesickness is real. So is resilience. You've got this." My parents didn't send anything, didn't call, didn't acknowledge that I was leaving. That should have hurt more than it did. But by then, I'd done enough therapy to understand that grief isn't just for death. It's for the loss of what you thought you had, what you hoped for, what you needed but never received. I was grieving the parents I should have had, not the ones I did have. And that grief, while painful, was also clean, final, something I could work through and move past. New York was overwhelming at first. Too loud, too crowded, too fast. But it was also liberating in ways I hadn't expected. Nobody here knew my story. Nobody looked at my growing out hair, still short but softer now, less angry looking, and whispered. Nobody pitied me or asked intrusive questions. I was just another freshman, anonymous in the best possible way. I made friends, joined clubs, found a work-study position at the library that paid enough for books and subway fare. I studied economics and political science, drawn to subjects that helped me understand power, how it works, who has it, how it's maintained and transferred, and sometimes stolen from people who deserve it more. I was good at it, really good. By the end of my first semester, I had a 4.0 and 3 professors asking if I'd considered graduate school. And I barely thought about my family at all. Until the email arrived in February of my freshman year. It was from my father's sister, Aunt Linda, who I'd always liked but rarely saw. She lived in California, worked in tech, and had always been the family member who asked real questions instead of making small talk. "Natalie, I heard what happened. I'm sorry it took me this long to reach out. Your mother told the family you'd had a fight and needed space, and I respected that. But then I ran into one of your high school teachers at a conference, and she told me the real story. She showed me your graduation speech. I'm furious. At your parents. At Veronica. At myself for not paying closer attention. I want you to know, what they did to you was unconscionable. You were right to protect yourself. You were right to leave. And if you need anything, money, legal advice, just someone to talk to, I'm here. No conditions, no expectations, just support. Also, I've attached some documents I thought you might find interesting. Information about your parents' finances, about exactly how much money Veronica's been giving them, and for how long. I think you deserve to know the truth. Love, Aunt Linda. I downloaded the attachments with shaking hands. Bank statements, tax returns, loan documents, all annotated in Aunt Linda's neat handwriting, explaining what I was looking at. The truth was worse than I'd thought. Veronica hadn't just been helping my parents with a few bills. She'd been essentially funding their entire lifestyle for the past 5 years. The house they lived in, she'd paid off the mortgage after they'd nearly foreclosed. The cars they drove, leased in her name. My father's medical bills from a surgery 3 years ago, covered entirely by Veronica. My parents weren't just financially dependent on my sister. They were completely, utterly owned by her. And there was more. According to Aunt Linda's notes, Veronica had been using this leverage for years, not just with me, but with our parents in general. Controlling where they lived, what they spent money on, who they stayed in contact with. She'd convinced them to cut off Aunt Linda, actually, after Linda had criticized Veronica's treatment of a boyfriend. She'd made them stop attending my younger cousin's wedding, because the cousin had once beaten Veronica at an academic competition. My sister hadn't just hurt me. She'd been systematically controlling and manipulating our parents for years, and they'd let her because they were too afraid of losing her money to stand up to her. I sat there in my dorm room, looking at these documents, and felt something shift inside me. Not anger, I'd moved past that. Not even pity, really, though I felt some of that for my parents who'd traded their autonomy for financial security. What I felt was clarity. My family was sick. Fundamentally, systemically sick. And getting away from them was the best thing I could have done. I wrote back to Aunt Linda, thanking her for the information and for reaching out. We started emailing regularly after that. Nothing deep, just check-ins, updates on life, the kind of casual family contact that felt safe because it wasn't contaminated by the dysfunction I'd grown up in. And then, in March, I got a text from an unknown number. Nat, it's Mum. Please don't delete this. I need to tell you something important. Veronica is sick. Really sick. The doctors found something and they need to do more tests, but it's not looking good. She's asking for you. She wants to apologize. Please. She's your sister. Whatever happened, she's still your sister. I stared at the text for a long time. Then I blocked the number and went to class. The texts from my mother's various numbers, she kept trying new ones when I blocked the old, continued for 2 weeks. Each one more desperate than the last. The cancer is spreading. Please come home. She's crying for you. She says she's sorry. You're going to regret this when she's gone. How can you be so heartless? She's dying. I didn't respond to any of them. Didn't block them either this time. Just let them accumulate in a folder. More evidence for the file I was building of exactly who these people were and how they operated. Because here's what I'd learnt in my months of therapy, in my long conversations with Sarah Chen and Aunt Linda, and my new friends who came from functional families and couldn't quite believe my story. Guilt is a tool. When used consciously and sparingly, It's how we maintain moral accountability. But when wielded carelessly, when deployed to manipulate and control, it becomes a weapon. And my family had been weaponizing guilt against me for my entire life. You're so smart, but couldn't you try to not make Veronica feel bad about her grades? You're so pretty, but maybe you could dress down a bit so your sister doesn't feel insecure? You won the scholarship? That's wonderful, honey. But maybe don't mention it at dinner. You know how sensitive Ronnie gets about money. Everything I achieved, every success I had, every moment I shined, it had all been framed as something I needed to apologize for or minimize or hide, because my existence made someone else uncomfortable. Well, I was done with that. So when my mother texted, she wants to see you before she dies, I didn't feel guilty for saying no. I felt liberated. Margaret Whitmore, my scholarship benefactor, noticed something was bothering me during our monthly dinner in April. We were at a quiet Italian restaurant near campus, and I'd been pushing my pasta around my plate for 20 minutes without eating. Want to talk about it? She asked gently. I told her everything. The texts, Veronica's alleged cancer, my mother's escalating desperation, the guilt I wasn't feeling, and the concern that maybe I should be feeling it. That maybe I was broken somehow. That maybe I was the heartless one. Margaret listened without interrupting. When I finished it, she set down her fork and looked at me with those sharp, knowing eyes. When my sister was dying, she said, she asked to see me. This was 20 years after she'd sabotaged my college applications. 15 years after she'd stolen money from me. 10 years after she'd tried to turn our mother against me. She was dying, and she wanted to make amends. Did you go? I asked. I did. And you know what she said to me? I shook my head. She said, I'm sorry you never got over it. I'm sorry you held on to grudges for so long. I'm sorry you couldn't be the bigger person. She apologized for my reaction to her actions, but never for the actions themselves. And then she asked me to take care of her kids. The same kids she'd kept from me for years. The same kids I barely knew. She wanted me to be her safety net, while still refusing to admit she'd ever done anything wrong. What did you do? I said no. I left. And when she died 3 months later, I didn't go to the funeral. Margaret paused. Some people thought I was cruel. My mother certainly did. But here's what I've learned. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is stop participating in someone else's dysfunction. Stop enabling, stop pretending that relationships can exist without accountability. Do you regret it? I asked. Not for a second. My sister had years to apologize. Real apologies, not the kind where you're actually just apologizing for the other person's feelings. She had years to change. She chose not to. Her illness didn't erase that. It just made other people think I should. That conversation freed something in me. Gave me permission to trust my instincts. To believe that I wasn't being heartless or cruel, but rather refusing to set myself on fire to keep other people warm. So when my mother texted, "She's in hospice now. This is your last chance," I finally replied. I hope she finds peace, but I'm not coming. Take care of yourself, Mum. Then I blocked every number she'd been texting from and changed my own. Veronica died in May. I found out not from my family, but from a news article that Jasmine sent me. Veronica had apparently made partner at a different law firm, smaller than Chen and Associates, less prestigious, but still respectable. The article was a death notice in the legal community newsletter, praising her sharp mind and tireless advocacy and dedication to her clients. It didn't mention what she'd done to me. It didn't mention why she'd left her previous firm. It didn't mention that she'd died estranged from the sister she'd assaulted. It was, like everything about Veronica, a carefully curated image that bore little resemblance to the truth. I waited to feel something. Grief, maybe, or guilt, or relief that it was finally over. But mostly I just felt empty. She'd been dead to me long before her actual death. This just made it official. My mother called, from another new number, the day after Veronica died. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Natalie?" Her voice was wrecked. "She's gone. Your sister is gone." "I know. I saw the article." "You saw the—" She made a sound between a sob and a laugh. "You couldn't even be bothered to call and ask how we're doing? You had to read about it in a goddamn article. You have my new number for one reason only," I said calmly. "Emergencies. Real emergencies, not guilt trips. Was there something you actually needed to tell me?" "The funeral is Saturday. In Sacramento. We need you there." "I'm not coming." "Natalie, she's your sister, but she was my sister." Past tense. "The person who was my sister died the night she paid you to assault me. Everything after that was just cleanup." My mother's breathing got ragged. "How can you be so cold? How can you, after everything we did for you, everything you did for me?" I felt something crack inside me, not breaking, but opening, like a door I'd been holding shut, finally giving way. "Mum, let me be very clear with you about what you did for me versus what you did to me. You fed me, you housed me, you sent me to school. That's not doing something for me. That's meeting the bare minimum legal requirement for being a parent. You don't get credit for keeping me alive. What you did to me was create an environment where I had to compete with my sister for basic respect, where I had to make myself smaller so she could feel bigger, where my achievements were problems to be managed instead of things to celebrate, where I learned that love was conditional on convenience and that family means nothing if there's money on the line. And then, and this is the part I need you to really hear, you drugged me and shaved my head while I was unconscious because your other daughter threatened you with poverty if you didn't. So no, Mom, I don't owe you my presence at Veronica's funeral. I don't owe you my grief or my forgiveness or my performance of family unity. I don't owe you anything. We made mistakes. You made choices. Stop calling them mistakes. Mistakes are accidental. What you did was intentional. Natalie, please. I have to go. I have finals to study for. I have a life here that doesn't involve you or Dad or any of this dysfunction. And I'd like to keep it that way. So that's it. You're just cutting us off. Forever. I thought about that. About whether I wanted to leave the door open, just a crack, for some possible future reconciliation. About whether I owed them hope. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe forever. Maybe just until you're capable of taking real accountability, instead of just asking me to get over it. But right now, yeah, I'm cutting you off. Because my mental health is more important than your comfort. You're going to regret this, maybe, but I'll regret staying in contact more. I hung up before she could respond. This time, I didn't wait for her to call back. I blocked the number immediately, then called my phone carrier and had them block all calls from Sacramento area codes. Then I emailed Aunt Linda and asked her to let me know if any real family emergencies came up, but to please not pass along any messages from my parents. She wrote back within an hour. Good for you. Boundaries are love. I've got your back. And that was that. My family of origin was gone. Not through death, but through choice, my choice. The first truly free choice I'd made in 18 years. Summer came. I stayed in New York, took a summer class, got an internship at a non-profit that worked on financial literacy programs for low-income families. I was good at it, good at explaining complex financial concepts in simple terms, good at helping people understand the systems designed to keep them powerless, good at recognizing abuse when it wore the mask of help. My hair was growing back. Still short. I was keeping it that way intentionally now. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. It turned out I liked how I looked, without the long hair I'd been so vain about. Liked the way my face looked stronger, more defined. Liked that I looked nothing like the girl in my high school photos, the one who'd been so desperate to be perfect. This version of me was better. Harder maybe, but harder in the way steel is hard. Not brittle, but tempered by heat into something stronger than it started. In August, I got an email from a producer at a major podcast network. They'd seen my graduation speech, followed my story, and wanted to know if I'd be interested in being interviewed about family estrangement and bodily autonomy and finding yourself after trauma. I almost said no, almost deleted the email and went on with my life, keeping my story private. But then I thought about all the other people out there, the ones with families like mine, the ones who'd been taught that loyalty meant accepting abuse, the ones who needed permission to save themselves. And I thought, maybe I can give them that permission. So I said yes. The interview posted in September, right as I was starting my sophomore year. It was 2 hours long, me and the host talking about what had happened, how I'd survived, what I'd learned. I cried a few times, laughed a few times, said things I'd never said out loud before about what it feels like to grieve people who are still alive. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of emails from listeners saying thank you, saying me too, saying I thought I was the only one. Survivors of family abuse who'd never had the language for what happened to them. Adult children who'd gone no contact and been told they were cruel. Young people still stuck in situations like mine, looking for hope that escape was possible. I read every email. I couldn't respond to all of them, but I read them all. And I started to understand that my story, the most painful thing that had ever happened to me, had become something useful. Something that helped other people feel less alone. That's what healing looks like, I realized. Not forgetting, not pretending it didn't happen, but taking the pain and transforming it into something that serves you instead of destroying you. Sarah Cheng called me after the podcast went live. "I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "That took tremendous courage." "I learned from the best," I said. "No, you did that all yourself. I just witnessed it." We talked for a while about her sister, about how she'd eventually found peace with the estrangement, about how sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop fighting for relationships that harm you. And then, just before we hung up, she said something that stayed with me. The opposite of family dysfunction isn't perfect family harmony. It's choosing people who choose you. Building family from friends, from mentors, from anyone who treats you with the respect you deserve. Blood doesn't make family. Love and respect do. She was right. I'd built a new family. Margaret and Sarah and Aunt Linda, Jasmine and her parents. My Columbia friends, who made me laugh and challenged my thinking and showed up when I needed them. This family was chosen, earned, built on mutual respect instead of obligation. And it was better than what I'd left behind. Finals week of my sophomore year. I was in the library studying for my microeconomics exam when I got a call from an unknown New York number. Usually I didn't answer those, but I'd been applying for summer internships and thought it might be one of them. Hello? Natalie Chen? A man's voice. Professional, but warm. Speaking. Hi, my name is David Park. I'm a producer at HBO Documentary Films. I'm calling about your story, the graduation speech, the family estrangement, your podcast interview. We'd like to do a short documentary about you if you're interested. I nearly dropped the phone. A documentary? I repeated stupidly, not a full feature, probably 30 to 40 minutes. We want to talk to you about bodily autonomy, family dynamics, what it means to choose yourself when your family won't. And we'd like to follow you for a few months, show what your life looks like now. Show people that you can survive this kind of the thing and build something beautiful on the other side. Would you want to interview my family? I asked carefully. Only if you're comfortable with it. We'd primarily focus on you, your perspective, your healing journey. But if you wanted to confront them or have that conversation on camera, we'd facilitate that. I thought about it. About seeing my parents again. About giving them a platform to explain themselves or apologize, or most likely make excuses. About whether I wanted that footage to exist. Proof of their dysfunction or maybe their remorse, depending on how it went. Can I think about it? I asked. Of course. Take your time, here's my number. Call me when you've decided. I spent the next week thinking about nothing else. Talking it over with Margaret, with Sarah, with my therapist. Reading articles about documentary ethics and exploitation and whether trauma should be public. And then I called Aunt Linda. Do it, she said immediately. Not for them. Not to shame them or get revenge. But do it for all those people who heard your podcast and felt less alone. Do it so that 5 years from now, some teenager going through what you went through can see your documentary. And no, they're not crazy. No, they're not the problem. No, they can survive. What if I regret it? I asked. Then you'll regret it. But you'll regret not doing it more. Trust me. So I called David back and said yes. They started filming in June, right after school let out. We did long interviews about my childhood, about Veronica, about the night I woke up bald. We filmed me going to therapy, working at my internship, having dinner with my chosen family. We filmed me looking at old photos of myself with long hair, talking about what I'd lost and what I'd gained. And then David asked if I'd be willing to reach out to my parents, to offer them a chance to tell their side. You don't have to, he said. We can make a compelling documentary without them. But their perspective would add depth. It would show the full picture. I thought about the emails I'd gotten after the podcast. The ones from parents saying they'd failed their kids. They'd made similar choices. They wished they'd done better. The ones asking how to make amends. The ones from adult children asking whether reconciliation was possible, whether parents could change. Okay, I said, but I don't want to be there when you interview them. I don't want to see them yet. Just find out if they're willing to take responsibility. Really take responsibility. And if they are, maybe we can talk about next steps. David reached out to my parents through Aunt Linda. They agreed to be interviewed immediately. Too immediately. In a way that made me suspicious. Like they saw this as an opportunity to rehabilitate their image rather than actually reckon with what they'd done. I waited anxiously while the film crew went to Sacramento. Imagined what my parents might say. Hoped, despite myself, that maybe they'd surprise me. Maybe they'd grown. Maybe they'd done the work. David called me the evening after the interview. His voice was careful, measured. The voice of someone delivering bad news gently. "You're going to want to see the footage yourself," he said, "but I'm going to summarize the highlights so you're prepared." "That bad?" I asked. "It's complicated. They're clearly hurting. They claim they've been in therapy. Your mother cried through most of the interview, but they didn't actually apologize. No, they didn't. They explained, they justified, they talked a lot about how hard it's been for them. Your mother said, and I quote, 'I think we were all traumatized that night.' She's positioned herself as a fellow victim of what happened." I closed my eyes. Of course she had. What about my dad? He said less. Mostly just echoed your mother. He did say he wishes he'd been stronger than that, he'd stood up to Veronica. But he also said... David paused. "He said that you took it too far by going no contact. That it was extreme and unfair given that they were in an impossible situation. Anything else? Your mother asked if you'd be willing to reconcile. Said she'd do whatever it takes. When I asked what that meant, she said she'd be willing to meet you halfway and start fresh. Start fresh. As if the past could just be erased, as if healing meant pretending nothing had happened." "Thank you for warning me," I said. "When can I see the footage?" "Tomorrow if you want. But Natalie, I want you to know that you don't have to include this in the documentary. We have plenty of material without it. This is your story, your choice." I did watch the footage. Sat in the editing suite with David and watched my parents cry and explain and completely fail to understand why what they'd done was unforgivable. My mother. "We thought it would grow back quickly. We didn't realize she'd be so upset." My father. "Veronica was very convincing. She made it sound like it wasn't a big deal." My mother. "We were afraid. We didn't know what else to do." My father. "We love Natalie so much. We just want our family back. Never once. We assaulted her. Never once. We violated her trust. Never once. We chose me over our daughter's safety and autonomy. Just excuses. Just justifications. Just the same patterns that had defined my entire childhood. Refuse accountability, minimize harm, make it about their feelings instead of their actions." I watched the whole interview without crying. When it was over, I turned to David. "Include it," I said, "all of it. I want people to see this. I want them to understand what it looks like when people can't or won't change. When I'm sorry doesn't actually mean anything because it's not followed by action or accountability. Are you sure? I'm sure. Because here's what I've learned. Some people are waiting for permission to leave. They're waiting for proof that reconciliation isn't always possible or even healthy. They're waiting for someone to tell them it's okay to stop trying to fix relationships that are fundamentally broken. This footage, my parents' complete inability to take responsibility, that's the proof. That's the permission. So we kept it in. The documentary became not just my story, but a story about what accountability looks like, and what it looks like when it's absent. About the difference between regret and remorse. About why I'm sorry isn't enough if it's not accompanied by change. The documentary premiered in February of my junior year. HBO promoted it heavily. My face on billboards in New York. Interviews on morning shows, articles in major publications about family estrangement and bodily autonomy and generational trauma. I'd prepared myself for backlash. For people saying I was too harsh, too unforgiving, that I should have given my parents another chance, that I was airing family business that should have stayed private. But that's not what happened. What happened was an avalanche of support. From trauma survivors, from therapists, from people who'd spent years in dysfunctional families and finally felt seen. The documentary became a cultural moment. Think pieces about family estrangement, debates about where we draw the line between forgiveness and self-preservation, conversations about whether adult children owe their parents anything. And overwhelmingly, the response was, no. Adult children don't owe their parents a relationship. Not if that relationship harms them. Not ever. I did interviews where hosts would start by asking me about forgiveness, about whether I thought I'd ever reconcile with my parents. And I'd smile. That calm, settled smile of someone who's made peace with her choices. And say, I've forgiven them in the sense that I don't actively wish them harm. I hope they find peace. I hope they grow. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean I have to have them in my life. It just means I'm not carrying their guilt for them anymore. People started using my story as a reference point. Like that girl from the HBO documentary became shorthand for family estrangement that was justified, necessary, the right choice, even though it was the hard one. I graduated from Columbia a year early, took extra classes, summer courses, tested out of requirements. Graduated summa cum laude with a double major in economics and public policy. Margaret was there, and Sarah and Aunt Linda and Jasmine and her parents, my chosen family, filling an entire row, cheering louder than anyone else when I walked across the stage. My parents weren't there. Neither was Veronica, obviously, and I didn't miss them. Didn't feel the hole where they should have been. I felt only the fullness of being surrounded by people who'd chosen me, who'd proven through actions, and not just words, that I mattered to them. After graduation, I got a job at a non-profit focused on financial justice, helping people trapped in predatory lending situations, advocating for policy changes, teaching financial literacy to communities that had been systematically excluded from wealth-building opportunities. It paid barely anything, but it felt right. Felt like taking all the pain I'd experienced around family and money and control and transforming it into something useful. I was good at my job, really good. Within a year, I was managing programs. Within 2, I was being headhunted by larger organizations, offered positions with real power and real salaries. But I stayed where I was. Because the work mattered more than the prestige. Because I'd learned that success wasn't about money or status or proving anything to anyone. It was about building a life that reflected your values. About using your pain to prevent other people's. About choosing yourself every single day, even when it was hard. 3 years after the documentary premiered, I got a letter. Not an email, an actual handwritten letter, forwarded through my lawyer. Because yes, I had a lawyer now. You don't go through what I went through without learning the value of legal protection. It was from my mother. I almost threw it away without reading it. Almost decided that nothing she could say would matter, would change anything, would be worth the emotional energy of engaging. But something made me open it. Maybe curiosity, maybe hope, despite everything. Maybe just the part of me that still remembered being a little girl who loved her mother before everything got complicated as it is. The letter was 10 pages, handwritten on plain white paper. I made myself coffee, sat down at my kitchen table, and read it straight through. Dear Natalie, I've started this letter 100 times over the past 3 years. Each time, I've thrown it away because I couldn't find the right words. I'm not sure there are right words for what I need to say, but I'm going to try anyway, because you deserve this. You've always deserved this, and I'm done being too cowardly to give it to you. I assaulted you. Your father and I assaulted you. We drugged you. We shaved your head without your consent. We violated your body and your trust in ways that I'm not sure can ever be forgiven. And we did it because we were afraid. Not for you, but for ourselves. We were afraid of losing our house, our financial security, our comfortable life. We were afraid of Veronica's anger and her power over us. We were afraid, and we sacrificed you to manage our fear. That's not an explanation. It's not an excuse, it's just the truth. After you left, after you stopped talking to us, I told myself you were overreacting, that you were being dramatic, ungrateful, cruel. I told myself we'd done our best, that you'd understand eventually, that time would heal everything. I told myself a lot of lies because the alternative, admitting what we'd really done, was too painful. But then I watched the documentary. I watched the interview your father and I gave, and I heard myself saying those things. We thought it would grow back quickly. We didn't realize you'd be so upset. And I finally saw what you must have seen. I saw someone who was more concerned with managing her image than taking responsibility. Someone who was still making excuses. Someone who was asking you to get over it instead of doing the work to deserve your forgiveness. I was disgusted with myself. I am disgusted with myself. Your father and I have been in therapy for 2 years now. Real therapy, not the kind where we go to one session and decide we're fixed. We've been working on understanding how we created the family dynamic that led to that night. How we centered Veronica's feelings over yours for your entire childhood. How we taught you that your value was contingent on not inconveniencing us. How we failed you long before we drugged you. My therapist asked me recently what I would say to you if I had the chance. If you were sitting in front of me and I could say anything. And I realized I'd say I'm sorry. Really sorry. Not sorry that you're hurt, or sorry that things went badly, or sorry for mistakes we made. Sorry for what we did. Sorry that we assaulted you. Sorry that we chose money over your safety. Sorry that we failed to protect you from your sister and from ourselves. I'm sorry, Natalie. I'm so sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to want a relationship with me. I don't expect anything. This letter is not about what I need from you. It's about what you deserved to hear 3 years ago, and what I was too broken and selfish to say. I'm proud of you. I watch you from a distance. I've read every article about you, watched every interview, followed your work at the non-profit. You're doing exactly what I hoped you would do. Building a life that matters. Helping people. Refusing to let what happened to you define your worth. You're extraordinary. You always were. And I'm sorry I couldn't see that when it would have mattered most. I don't know if we'll ever speak again. I don't know if you'll even read this letter. But I needed to write it. Needed to put these words on paper. To stop hiding behind fear and shame and all the other things that kept me from being the mother you needed. I love you. I failed you. Both things are true. And I'm sorrier than I have words for. Your mother, I read the letter 3 times. The first time I cried. Angry tears, frustrated tears. Tears for the mother-daughter relationship we could have had if she'd been capable of this honesty 3 years ago. The second time, I felt nothing. Just numb. Detached. Like I was reading about someone else's family. The third time, I felt something like relief. Not because I was ready to forgive. Not because this letter fixed anything. But because it gave me something I'd been missing. Acknowledgement. Real acknowledgement, without excuses or qualifications. She'd finally said what I needed to hear. It didn't change anything. I wasn't going to call her, wasn't going to invite her back into my life, wasn't going to pretend that one good letter erased 18 years of dysfunction and 3 years of silence. But it mattered. It mattered that she'd done the work. It mattered that she could finally see what she'd done. It mattered that she'd given me this without demanding anything in return. I put the letter in a drawer. Maybe someday I'd respond to it. Maybe someday I'd be ready for a conversation. But not now. Not yet. Possibly not ever. For now, it was enough to know that she'd finally understood. That my pain had been real, my anger justified, my decision to leave the right one. That I'd been right about everything. I'm 25 now. It's been 7 years since graduation. 7 years since I woke up bald and chose to stay visible anyway. 7 years of building a life that doesn't include the family I was born into, but includes a dozen families I've chosen instead. I still have the letter my mother sent. I've never responded to it. She hasn't written again. Hasn't asked for a response, hasn't pushed. Hasn't demanded anything. Just gave me that one letter, and then respected my silence, which is perhaps the most genuine apology she could have offered. I see Aunt Linda regularly. She moved to New York 2 years ago, and we have dinner once a month. Always at the same Italian place where Margaret and I used to meet, before Margaret passed away last year. Cancer. She left me her scholarship fund in her will. Told me to keep saving brilliant young women who need someone to believe in them. I cried for a week. I'm engaged now. To someone kind, someone stable, someone who thinks my trauma history is something I survived rather than something that makes me damaged. Someone who knows every terrible detail of what happened to me and loves me not despite it, but including it. Because it's part of the story that made me who I am. My hair is still short. I keep it that way intentionally. A reminder that I'm not the girl who needed long hair to feel beautiful. That I'm not the girl who made herself smaller for other people's comfort. That I'm the woman who stood at a podium with a bare head and refused to be invisible. Last month, I got an email from a teenager in Ohio. She'd seen my documentary in her high school sociology class. She wrote, "My parents are like yours, my sister is like yours. I thought I was going crazy. I thought I was the problem. But your documentary showed me I'm not. I'm planning to leave as soon as I turn 18. I'm scared, but I know I can't stay. Thank you for showing me it's possible to survive this. Thank you for being brave enough to tell your story." I wrote back, gave her resources, hotlines, support groups, information about financial aid for students from abusive homes. Told her what I wish someone had told me. That leaving is terrifying, but staying is worse. That healing is possible. That she deserves better than what her family is giving her. She's not the first person who's reached out. She won't be the last. My story has become something bigger than me. A roadmap for people trying to escape family dysfunction. A reference point for therapists treating family estrangement. A catalyst for conversations about bodily autonomy and consent, and what children actually owe their parents. The answer, I've learned, is nothing. Children owe their parents nothing. Parents owe their children everything. That's how the debt of family works. It only goes one direction. And anyone who tells you otherwise is trying to manipulate you. Sometimes I think about what my life would look like if that night had never happened. If Veronica hadn't been jealous. If my parents had chosen differently. If I'd walked across that graduation stage with my long hair intact and my family dysfunction still hidden beneath a veneer of normalcy. I probably would have gone to Columbia anyway. Probably would have been successful. Probably would have had a nice life. But I wouldn't have been free. Because the truth is, that night didn't create my family's dysfunction. It just made it visible. It just forced me to see what had always been true. That I was valued less than money. That my sister's comfort mattered more than my safety. That my parents' love was contingent on my compliance. If that night hadn't happened, I might have spent my whole life trying to earn their approval, might have shaped myself around their limitations, might have stayed small so they could feel big. Instead, I left. I built a new life. I became someone I actually like instead of someone other people wanted me to be. And I'm not going to lie, it was hard. It's still hard sometimes. There are moments when I see other people with their parents. When I watch someone call their mum for advice, zorbaив with their sister at a family gathering. And I feel the absence of what I don't have. But then I remember what I had before. The constant tension, the walking on eggshells, the knowledge that I was loved conditionally, if at all. And I realize I'm not missing out on anything good. I'm just missing what I wished I'd had, what I deserved to have, what I was never going to get from them. And that grief is real. It's valid. But it's also clean. It's not contaminated by ongoing abuse or false hope, or the exhausting work of trying to change people who don't want to change. I chose myself. And I'd make that choice again, every single day, for the rest of my life. Last week, I gave a keynote speech at a conference on trauma and resilience. 500 people in the audience, therapists, social workers, advocates, survivors. I stood at that podium, looked out at all those faces, and told my story one more time. But this time, I focused on the ending, the part that comes after the pain, the part about building something new from the rubble of what was destroyed. People ask me all the time, I said, if I've forgiven my family, if we've reconciled, if there's been some healing, some closure, some resolution. And the answer is complicated, because forgiveness isn't one thing. Reconciliation isn't the only form of healing. And sometimes, resolution looks like acceptance rather than reunion. I've accepted that my family was sick in ways they might never heal from. I've accepted that what happened to me was both intentional and unforgivable. I've accepted that I did everything right. I set boundaries. I asked for accountability. I gave them chances to change. And they still couldn't show up for me. And I've also accepted that leaving was the healthiest thing I could have done. Not just for me, but honestly for them too. Because staying in a toxic family system doesn't help anyone. It just perpetuates the dysfunction, teaches the next generation that abuse is love, keeps everyone stuck in patterns that hurt. When I left, I freed myself, but I also freed them from having to pretend, from having to maintain the illusion that we were a normal, happy family. I took away their favorite scapegoat, and in doing so, I forced them to look at the actual problems in their relationships, instead of blaming everything on my supposed sensitivity. I don't know if they've done that work. I don't know if they ever will. But it's not my responsibility to find out. My responsibility is to myself, to the girl who woke up bald and scared and violated, and to the woman she became. To protect her, to honor her, to build a life where she never has to shrink again. The applause when I finished was long and loud, but that's not what I remember most. What I remember is the line of people who waited to talk to me afterwards. The ones with tears in their eyes, saying thank you and me too, and I thought I was the only one. The ones who were still in their toxic families, trying to figure out if leaving was possible. The ones who'd already left, but felt guilty about it. The ones who'd never had words for what they experienced until they heard my story. I talked to every single person. Gave them what I wished someone had given me. Permission to save themselves. Validation that their pain was real. Hope that healing was possible. And when I finally left that conference and got in the call back to my hotel, I looked at my reflection in the window, at the short hair I'd styled intentionally, at the face that finally looked like mine, at the woman I'd become, and I thought, they tried to make me invisible. They failed. They tried to break me. They failed. They tried to teach me that I was worth less than money, less than convenience, less than my sister's insecurity. They failed. I'm still here. I'm still speaking. I'm still visible. And I'm never, ever going to be small again. Sometimes people ask me if I have regrets, if I wish I'd handled things differently, if I think there was a way to keep my family and my dignity both. The answer is no. Because here's what I've learned. You can't compromise on your worth. You can't negotiate your value. You can't stay in a situation where your basic humanity is up for debate and hope that eventually people will decide you deserve respect. Sometimes the only winning move is to walk away, to choose yourself so completely, so unapologetically that there's no room for doubt, to build a life that doesn't include the people who hurt you and then refuse to feel guilty about it. That's what I did. That's what I'm still doing every day. And if someone out there is reading this, if someone is in the situation I was in, trapped in a family that values you conditionally, that treats your pain as inconvenient, that asks you to shrink so other people can expand, I want you to know you can leave. You can choose yourself. You can build a new family from people who actually see you, value you, choose you back. It won't be easy. It might be the hardest thing you ever do. But I promise you, I swear to you, it's worth it. Because on the other side of that choice is freedom, real freedom. The kind where you wake up and don't have to brace yourself for the day. Where you're surrounded by people who would never, ever ask you to be less than you are. Where you finally get to just be. That's where I am now. 7 years out from the worst night of my life, and I'm finally free. They tried to make me invisible. Instead, they made me unforgettable. And I'm done apologizing for taking up space. If you or someone you know is experiencing family abuse or considering estrangement, resources are available. You are not alone. Your pain is valid. You deserve safety, respect, and unconditional love. And if you can't get those things from your family of origin, you have permission to build a new family from people who will choose you every single time.